As Russia is intensifying its attacks in the western part of Ukraine, right over here, you can see that what's been happening over the last couple of weeks now is a ramping up of NATO's forces to make sure that the Russians don't get any ideas. We're just going to zoom in, if we can, on the graphic as well to give you a sense that the alliance sending more troops, planes, ships to the eastern flank to try and deter Russia. There are now more than 40,000 troops all the way along here from Bulgaria down in the south, all the way up to Estonia in the north. And you get a sense of this sort of blue wall that NATO has created to try and contain the Russians as well, all of it under NATO command, stationed in those countries to make sure that those countries not only feel secure in light of what's going on with Ukraine, but also as they are taking in more and more refugees, that too becomes a major issue for them. But you get a sense here of the troops, air defense, also not only that, the air power they've got. And remember, there's a big issue about those MiG jets in Poland being sent into Ukraine. That has not happened yet. The Americans are resistant to that. They also say there's no point in sending those old Soviet MiGs because they'll be shot down very quickly by the Russians. Let's bring in retired Lieutenant General the Honourable Andrew Leslie, who is the Deputy Commander of NATO Land Forces in Afghanistan, also a Liberal Member of Parliament for Orleans. Always good to see you, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Todd, for having me on the show.
The missiles that struck that aircraft repair facility near Lviv, what do you make of that?
Unclassified reports say that they were missiles launched by Russian heavy bombers several hundred kilometers out. I think it's probably in part an attempt to shut down the repair facilities, as you quite rightly stated, but as well, let's not dismiss the impact on morale. Lviv is arguably the cultural center of Ukraine. It's been a hotbed of independent-minded academics and artists for many centuries, indeed, and they were perhaps amongst the most activist against Putin and his stupid ideas.
Your read on the state of the war now, as you know, we're into the fourth week, day 23 and counting, and yet the Ukrainians continue to hold all the major cities, really turning into kind of a brutal slog here for the Russians, certainly not the way they thought it was going to go. And so we're seeing this renewed emphasis on air power.
Yeah, this points to the fact that Putin has made some really stupid choices, starting with the invasion of the Ukraine. He overestimated his own abilities as a coordinator of armed forces. He attacked at the beginning of the muddy season, which essentially paralyzed the cross-country ability of a lot of his vehicles. He vastly overestimated the competence of his generals and the capabilities of his troops to synchronize the various instruments that are around them. He underestimated the willingness and passion of the Ukraine defenders, who are doing just heroic work. He underestimated the leadership of the Ukraine, and perhaps as significant as all the others, he underestimated the willingness of NATO to coalesce around the common idea of stopping this Russian bear from rampaging across the Ukraine.
As a former military man, can I ask you the impact that the Russian losses might have on their forces? And we just want to point out to our viewers at home, very difficult to get accurate numbers here, so just bear that in mind. But American intelligence saying the Russians have lost 7,000 soldiers who've died and another 14,000 or so wounded. Of those who were killed, that includes 3, possibly 4 generals. Now, when you start to see those numbers, 20,000 or so casualties out of a total force of, let's say, 150 or 200,000, what does that do to their fighting effectiveness?
Well, if you consider that the Russians are echelons, so they're not advancing in a broad front, they're sort of like pillars or hooks or poles of Russian tanks, columns of them. A long story short, it means that those troops at the very pointy end of the spear are taking disproportionate casualties to the overall number. So that's having a dramatic impact on their combat capability of those elements which are in contact. The flip side of that argument, or that point, however, is that there's still more combat power to come. This ground war, though, is by no means over. The Ukraine citizens and soldiers, these citizens, by the way, now fighting with anti-tank systems on their shoulders or anti-aircraft missiles, 3 short weeks ago were pure civilians, maybe a smattering of reserve training over the last 20 years. And they are doing extraordinarily good work and killing large numbers of Russians and destroying their machines.
We're going to bring up that map, General Leslie, one more time for our viewers, just, NATO's eastern flank to give them a sense of where things stand here and all the troops and the Air Force and air defense assets that have been moved into that region. Do you think when we hear a discussion about how this is just the beginning, that countries such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania in the north, Moldova, and others should be worried that based on what happens in Ukraine, certainly in the case of the Baltics, they could be next?
It took Putin 4 months to assemble his forces. And in that time, NATO did very little in terms of pre-positioning troops, tanks, air defense systems, or jets. And the political leadership, quite frankly, failed. But we can talk about that once this is all settled, if we get to that point. I would also say that so far, the 40 to 50,000 NATO troops that have deployed along the eastern flank of NATO, that's a fence. It's not a wall. You've got to double or triple that because we have to defend everywhere. And you never know what essentially Putin is going to do as he gets more and more delusional and as well as he continues to make really bad decisions. And Canada should be stepping up to the plate and contributing that which we promised, 3,400 additional soldiers, and they should probably go to Latvia where there's already 600, and they should be moving now.
The Honorable Andrew Leslie joining us, retired Lieutenant General. Thank you so much for this. Always good to tap into your expertise.